Bill Vale and Greg Skufka from the Pressure Deer Pros, and we want to tell you what this video is all about. We're a group of Christian guys who truly want to help people be more successful with their hunting. I don't care what the reason is, and there could be one in a million. You get a hold of us, you join our membership, and we will try to teach you and help you to overcome the obstacles you're facing. We have a great track record. We've helped a lot of people. We've helped a lot of people be successful. And we're just good, honest folks wanting to do the best we can.
Yep. There's tons of hunters out there across the U.S. that are hunting pressure deer, and they're busting their butts, just like we do. You bust your butt day in and day out, and you just don't achieve the success you want. You get those good bucks on your game cameras, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and then you don't see them, and you're not able to harvest them. Well, we work really hard to help people achieve their goals. And the other thing we do is we do a lot of experimentation, trying to figure out better ways to ambush these bucks. And we've got some great leading edge techniques that nobody else is doing. Like creating primary breeding scrapes is one example of that. Nobody else knows how to do that really and as effective as we are at it. And if you want to shoot your mature bucks, you really should consider us, because we're here to help you. We're one of the few organizations out there. When you call us, you could call us every day, theoretically, and we would talk to you. There's clients we have that, we talk to them a couple times a week as they're doing things. And there's people that are on a good buck, and there's one case out in Oklahoma where a really, really large 175-inch, I don't know exactly how big this buck is. These people have been trying to get on this buck for 4 years, and by using our techniques in our system, they've actually had shots at this buck. And matter of fact, it's kind of funny. In one case, didn't have the gun in the chamber, or the bullet in the chamber, when they could have had him. So anyway, hopefully you enjoy this video. We're going to go through the 10 truths of hunting pressure deer from our view. And after you've watched this, hopefully you'll say, wow, these guys are different, because we think we are.
God bless you, and have a great day from Bill and Greg at Pressure Deer Pro.
Thanks.
Okay, so what's basic truth number 1? If you're killing and happy with what you're harvesting every year as far as trophy quality animals, then I doubt very seriously if you need us. You're probably in a state where you're blessed with not as much pressure. However, if you're a hunter who is faced with the mirage of hunters that the rest of us are, every time we try to go to a good state land property to hunt, the state land property may have plenty of deer on it, but if you don't change your tactical approach to hunting on these pressured areas, you're not going to be successful unless you're just blessed with fortune that day. Trying to repeat that is something that what we're about at Pressure Deer Pro. I started this business because with my calendar and with my book, because I thought it was a crime to steal time from your family. And I was as guilty of it as anyone. I became obsessed with sport at a young age, and I spent a lot more time hunting than I should have, and the subsequent cost me quite a bit in return. I became a good hunter, an effective hunter, but looking back, I would trade all that for being able to redo how I spent my time. So I didn't want this to happen to other people. So ladies, this is for you as much as it is your husbands. If you want your husbands to spend less time afield, they need to be following the moon calendar. The moon calendar works not because it's mine, but because it belongs to the Lord. And I spent my whole entire life, 50 years, trying to research the effects of the moon on the deer, and we've come up with an incredibly accurate timing system. This means that you'll probably pay for the book and calendar or any of our products. You'll probably get your money back in gas alone. This is for the guy who doesn't really have a large budget but needs a lot of information. And we have tons and tons and tons of detailed information on how to hunt in different terrains. We can tell you how to hunt river bottoms. We can tell you how to hunt ridges. We can tell you how to hunt the flats of northern Ohio and places like Illinois. I've been all over the country. And a lot of these guys that are killing trophy class animals, big giant bucks every year, are simply living in places where they grow to abundance and they're not being pressured. And so therefore, to a hunter like us and you, it would be a piece of cake. I know one guy went to Iowa and he told me it was the last time he would go. He said it was too easy. He said if it was any easier, I wouldn't have had a good time. This is not the case where we hunt. Where I hunt, you're lucky to lay eyes on a trophy buck that you know is there 2 or 3 times a season. You know, and you're lucky to get your shot every year, and that's applying everything that you know and becoming as savvy as you can. The reason why I've been successful on state land is I'm just simply not hunting there when other people are present. Deer become very accustomed to people, the routine of people coming and going twice a day, and during the middle of the day, the woods seems to be void of any activity. This is where I specialize in taking surprise by the wary buck because I've been there all along, undetected. Therefore, his watchful eyes, ears, and nose is now playing against him and working for me instead. Listen, you know, everybody's got old school tactics. You can learn them anywhere. If you want to be different, then you have to go after these deer with a new set of tactics. I have rewritten the book of hunting fundamentals. People like to enter with the wind in their face. I like to enter it with it over my back. People like to hunt with the wind in their face. I like to blow right at the deer. You know, if you want to learn these kind of techniques and you'd like to know more about Pressure Deer Pro and how to be successful consistently on state land, then join our membership and give us a try. Give me a call on the phone. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. My telephone number is 269-830-8343. Who do you know that'll do that? That'll call you and you can talk to a guy with my kind of hunting experience anytime you want to. Become a member and find out. This is Bill Vale from the Pressure Deer Pros. I hope you've enjoyed this video.
So we're going to talk about truth number 2 now about hunting pressure deer. A lot of people say it's all about food, and certainly food's important. But Pressure Deer Pro, we really work on developing the property with diverse habitat in mind. You got to have diverse habitat, because what will happen is a lot of your deer will leave if you don't have the diverse habitat. So we're looking for habitat that is clear cuts. A lot of people do those. Very, very small hinge cut areas, because I'm not a big proponent of hinge cuts, except for buck areas, very targeted to give you the diversity. Switchgrass, giant miscanthus silvergrass, pines for thermal bedding. You know, you got to have all those things. Otherwise, what happens is when the leaf drop happens, the deer leave your property if you don't have diverse habitats. I also, at Pressure Deer Pro, we really don't like to have large bedding areas, more in a 2 to 4 acre size, like this one here. This is a 3 acre hardwood clear cut that was done 3 years ago. And the cover in here is unbelievable, including the browse. But one of the most important things we do differently than most of the consultants out there is we don't do any property development until, as we zoom in on some of the browse that you get from this clear cut, until we've identified our ambush locations. The ambush, when you're hunting pressure deer, the ambush location is absolutely the key. If you can't blow properly and allow the deer to feel secure, you will not harvest that mature buck you're after. So when you think about developing your property, there's way more that goes into it first. You just can't have somebody show up at your property for the first time and say, okay, let's clear cut this woods because it needs it. Put a food plot here because it's a good spot. If you can't ambush a deer at that food plot location, why put it there? It's not doing you any good. Unless you have a strategic plan to ambush the deer coming to that food plot. So there's lots of things like that we do at Pressure Deer Pro. So food is important, but the most important truth in my mind, in our mind at Pressure Deer Pro, is that you have diverse bedding so the deer stay on your property all times of the year. That's absolutely paramount to harvest mature bucks. One last thing, as you look around and see how thick this cover is, this is what it was like. If you look way up there into that hardwood, tall hardwood forest, that's what this was. This is not at all square. It's very, very elongated and irregular shaped. And it allows us to ambush deer coming through this in multiple locations. So that's it on truth number 2. It's Greg, hope you enjoyed this.
Truth number 3. It's going to be very difficult to harvest trophy animals consistently without being able to identify great ambush locations. And they have to be identified around the principles that we know to be true. In other words, I follow a scent program, but to me it's more about which direction I'm pitching my wind in accordance to the terrain or any particular point that I'm hunting at any given time. I will say I'm trying to pull the deer to me, not expect them to tailwind to me. Being able to identify ambush locations means being able to do it along river bottoms, understanding how to work the bends in the river, using the water code and things like that. It means being able to get them in the ridges, using blowovers and different wind techniques. It means being able to get them in the flatlands by simply narrowing them down and using surveillance to bring to life what you know to be true. Now, a lot of people say they never get a picture of the bucks moving in daylight hours. That's because they're putting their cameras in the wrong place. It's ridiculous to think that a buck goes down on his bed and does not move for 12 hours. That's not happening. I'm going to tell you that right now. They move every day, and they basically move at will according to when their instincts tell them to move. And one time they're not apt to be moving on heavily pressured land as at each end of the day. And the most likely time for them to be moving is right in the middle of the day. This separates you from 99% of the hunters, this tactic alone. Being in the woods hunting when no one else is there, or everybody else is on the couch waiting for the evening hunt. This is Bill Vale. I hope you enjoyed my opinion on truth number 3.
All right, truth number 4 at Pressure Deer Pro is you got to have a good walking stick. I'm just kidding. The fourth truth really is being able to identify sign in the woods and figure out what it means and then decide how you hunt that sign. For example, if you stumble on a primary breeding scrape, which is going to typically be a very large scrape, very deep, all kinds of broken branches, chewed on branches above the scrape, if you come upon a spot like that, it's actually very, very difficult to harvest a mature buck over that kind of a setup. You're usually too late. It's already been used, it's already been, used for breeding purpose or whatever, because they usually occur right about at that time. It's very difficult to go in and set up on the buck's terms to harvest him. He picked that location because of security, and it's also going to be an area where there's good cover, and it's also going to be an area where there's good travel through that spot. At Pressure Deer Pro, we believe in creating primary breeding scrapes, but we put them where we want them. And if you think about it, it switches the advantage from the buck to the hunter. And once you set spots up like this, you set these up in the spring, you don't have to go back. So there's absolutely no human intrusion in those locations where you create primary breeding scrapes. And we call it the communal effect that gets all the deer in the herd involved in those locations, and that's why it works. So that's truth number 4.
All right, so truth number 5. How important is it to set your tree stand up correctly? Oftentimes I see ladder stands stuck up to where they're so visible and they're so low to the ground that I can't even imagine a wind direction that they're trying to blow to beat deer with any given tactic. This kind of sloppy hunting is not going to cut it in pressure deer hunting area. Deer are so used to beating these people that if you're not doing something different, you're not going to beat them either. So, what's important about your tree stand placement? It needs to be someplace where nobody else is around, obviously. Number two, you have to be concealed. You have to watch out for the skylit syndrome. You have to peg the tree properly. Maybe it's a big tree and you have to come up the back of it and slide into your stand to keep from being seen. All these little details about hanging your stand, possibly having to zip tie some oak up in the tree with you to break your backdrop. It's like whatever it takes, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, don't be surprised when you get to moving around in your stand to try to get drawed if the buck doesn't pick you up in your peripheral vision and bolt on you. So you see, where you put your stand is important, but then fine-tuning it, not to mention how you're going to come, how you're going to go, keeping your presence unknown from the deer. And one final point is having shooting lanes pre-cut so that you don't deflect in low light and you know when the deer is standing in an open location. Just these tips alone will help you become a better hunter. If you're not taking this kind of care when setting up your stands, then expect to be met with the same type of adversity head on. Because if you don't do these things, they will catch you. This is Bill Vale from Pressure Deer Pro. I hope you've enjoyed this truth.
All right, moving on to truth 6. When you have a piece of property, you're a private landowner, and this could even be on state land as well. If you're going to develop your property and you're going to identify, like we do, your ambush locations first, there's a ton of planning that has to go into it if you're going to consistently harvest bucks, mature bucks. So the way we do it is when we go into locations, we go on a piece of property, and we did this here on my property, is you get your stand location identified, and then you ask this question: how many dimensions can I create at this one location so my odds go up dramatically that mature buck will come through this spot? Is there food close by? Multiple food locations. How about bedding areas? Multiple bedding areas close by. Do you have water here? Do I have a mineral station set up? Do I have a primary breeding scrape set up at this location? Do I have secondary scrapes at this location? So you can go on and on and on, and pretty soon you can take a stand. For example, if you put a stand over here and you got one run coming through and you got a bedding area on each end, you basically have 2 dimensions. They've got to be checking that bedding area in order for you to get to harvest in there. But if you have 8 or 10 dimensions on that same stand location, there's way more reasons for him to come through that spot. And that's why we really push that. The more dimensions in your stand locations, the greater the odds. They go up astronomically. They really jump when you take this approach. So that's we'll now move on to the next truth for hunting pressure deer.
Truth number 7. People say that big bucks can't be timed. I don't believe they can be patterned, but I know they can be timed. I've been timing large whitetails, mature bucks in the highest pressure county in the world for 30 years. They always move in the window recognized on my moon calendar. I spent 50 years developing this calendar, and there's been thousands of successful hunters, and every year giant deer are shot during the time windows that are mentioned on my calendar. Go ahead and watch this year. You'll see that the largest bucks will always be shot during the dark period via there is another outside force causing it. I mean, no one knows when a buck gets moved from a mile away and happens to show up. That can happen to anybody. I'm talking about timing them when there's no other hunters in the woods and having the deer running all over just for you because you're there at the right time. You see, a deer can be shot at any given place he's at, but he still has to be there at the right time. Learning where he's bedding, where he's feeding, learning how to set up stands in between, learning when they're going to be switching modes of operation tells us when to be hunting the bed to feed scenario, when to be hunting our branches, when to be taking advantage of the does, when to be doing this and when to be doing that, and timing is everything. I only hunt about 14 days a month. I have my way of hunting. I don't like to hunt mornings. The only time I hunt mornings is when I'm hunting all day. But I can teach you how to hunt mornings. I don't recommend you do it at the same place you're going to hunt evenings at. In other words, I would keep the two areas separate. And I have many reasons why I do these things. The main thing is to keep the pressure off your deer. And you trick the deer by being there during a time when they're supposed to move, and they know, or at least their instincts are telling them, that they are safe, and the illusion of safety is created, and you get to harvest the buck of a lifetime. This is Bill Vail from the Pressure Deer Pros. If you want to learn how to do that, get a hold of us.
All right, here at Pressure Deer Pro, we've been talking about truths, and this is truth number 8. The truth is that you can hold more than one mature buck on your property. In most properties, you typically have one really good buck on that property. He's the big baddest guy in the woods. He will run the other bucks off the property. We don't believe in that, and we don't have philosophy. Our approach has many bucks on a piece of property, because we do a development of a property in the habitat. Instead of having one big food plot or one big bedding area, we have way more diversity. So what happens is you can have 3 or 4 or 5 really good bucks on your property. And this property right here that I've been developing now for 8 years, we went from having 5 to 8 bucks on this property to now every December, January, when I do a census, we have 30 to 40 different bucks, all age classes. Obviously, the older age classes are the least number, but the fact remains that every year I have 5 to 10 4 to 6 year olds on this property, and we're harvesting consistently. So if you want to learn how to really develop your property and hold the bucks, that has to be a big part of your plan. It's really critical, and if you do it the way I'm doing it, it is unbelievable what you see in changes in not only the number of bucks, but the age class differential that you have. So that's truth number 8. All right, truth number 9 at Pressure Deer Pro is that you can harvest mature bucks consistently if you put a lot of pressure on your property. That is not true. You cannot harvest mature bucks consistently if you're pressuring your property significantly. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, how many times do you run deer out of a bedding area? Do you have sanctuaries, and how often do you let your scent blow into that sanctuary? How often do you go screaming through your woods with four-wheelers? Do you have dogs running around you from the neighbors? How are you doing with coyote control on your property? How often do you go to check your game cameras? When do you do it, and how do you do it? All those things put pressure on the deer. The more you do that, the less likely you're going to get to see those deer in daylight. So what are some of the things you can do to improve the pressure? Because you really want to minimize that. Whenever I go into my property, I take my side-by-side every time, even though I'd love to walk because it's beautiful like this out here in this woods today. But I take my side-by-side. I go slow, almost incredibly boring slow, like I'm a 75-year-old man, which I almost am, but not quite. So what happens with that is it's gotten to the point now when I go in there on my side-by-side, they know who it is, they know I'm coming through, they know I'm going to leave because I come in and then I leave. They hear that sound. I have had 3 and 4 year olds stand there and watch me go by because it's creating a low pressure environment. Do you have a boundary trail on the outside of your property so that whenever you need to access the center, you do it from the best location without impacting the property? Things like this are important when we design properties and layouts. We really teach and talk about laying out the property so we minimize the pressure. It's truly important, and it's not that hard to do, because one of the things that I always say to clients, I say, look, you bought this piece of property for your family, you pay the taxes on it, you still need to be able to use it. But if you lay it out properly, like I have a half-mile dirt bike track on this property, but I put it in the location that doesn't impact my deer hunting and doesn't pressure the deer. Things like that are important, so low pressure is key.
So, one more truth, and this one I think is going to be good news to a lot of people. For a lot of years, for like 30 years, I busted my tail. I'm talking about I spent 320 days a year in the field. I spent a lot of that time cutting brush, creating ambush locations. I stayed a busy fellow to the point of being obsessed, neglecting my family. Therefore, I began to want to get lost more and more in it because my family life wasn't going good, and it was all because I was spending way too much time and actually working myself to a frazzle. Gone all the day, most of the day, sometimes half the night, you know, and it's just not necessary. We have a system here at Pressure Deer Pro that we have developed. Younger guys, we have a system for you. You know, you can do more than the older fellows, but we're both getting older, and we've come up with a system that is so easy. The least amount of work that I've ever seen that you have to put into a hunting spot. And it's almost a pleasure to hunt this way because you spend very few days on stand, and the success rate is as high as that you can ever expect. Now, we know that conditions, temperature, and a bunch of things can override a good rut and make it less productive. But instead of during the rut being lost as to what to do because the buck could be anywhere, we make sure that when he's between does, he comes to our location. In other words, we don't chase the buck all over creation. We bring the buck to us, and he has to do what he is instinctively being told to do at that spot, and that will be in direct accordance to our plan. So he won't detect us on approach. He'll come during the day. We know what days he's going to be coming. It limits our amount of stand hunting, the hard work. The obsession goes out the window, and guess what? You're going to have a happy life because you're going to have a happy wife. It doesn't cost hardly any money to do the system, and you can literally hunt multiple states in one dark period. You could shoot up to 4 deer in different states in one dark period if you do it right. Greg and I, we've got some sets going right now. We're going to see what happens this fall with this incredible system. If you want to learn how to spend the least amount of time, money, and get the most bang for your buck, come become a member of Pressure Deer Pro, buy our books, follow the calendar, do what we all do, and you can become a successful hunter and do it consistently year after year without sacrificing God or family.